Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. So, if you absolutely love a good story about hidden leverage, spectacular corporate takeovers, and honestly, the ultimate cost of underestimating people, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're unpacking a truly dramatic case study of a woman who took a moment of profound public humiliation and flipped it into an absolute masterclass in strategic corporate control. We're going to break down exactly how she pulled it off, the hidden numbers behind the scenes, and the brilliant timeline of her execution. So get comfortable, focus in, and let's just dive right into the story of the daughter who saved her father's company. Okay, to really understand the scale of this corporate takeover, we first got to start with the inciting incident. Just picture this for a second. The wedding hall lights are glowing. We've got 29-year-old Aisha Reyes, hands still stained with fresh henna for her engagement party. She's standing across from her fiancé, Damien Sheffield. Now, Damien just happens to be the heir to the largest textile empire on the East Coast. And right beside him, his incredibly powerful father. The sheer brutality of what happens next is just striking. Out of nowhere, Damien's father announces loudly to the entire room, "This engagement ends right here. We don't need a daughter-in-law with no family name behind her." I mean, wow. The room goes completely dead silent. Aisha's mother is watching in tears, completely paralyzed. Because you see, their family's livelihood actually depends on the Sheffields. And Damien? He doesn't say a single word. He literally just turns away. So, how do you even respond to public humiliation of that magnitude? Well, Aisha didn't scream. She didn't cry in front of them. Instead, she calmly slipped off her ring, set it on the table, and delivered this quiet, incredibly steady promise. She said, "The person humiliating me tonight will be standing at my door tomorrow." And predictably, a wave of laughter rippled right through the hall. Not a single person in that room took her seriously. They just figured she was a heartbroken woman trying to save face. But that brings us to a crucial question. Did any of them actually know who Aisha really was? Because right here is where our explainer shifts gears. We're moving from what looks like a tragic family drama straight into a high-stakes, meticulously executed business strategy. While the Sheffield family thought they held all the cards, they were completely oblivious to the single most important piece of data in their entire corporate portfolio. Section 1. A hidden legacy. Let's rewind 3 months.
3 months prior to the party, Aisha had opened the will of her late father, Edward Reyes. Now, to the Sheffields, Edward was just a quiet, unremarkable businessman, a small-time vendor they had summarily dismissed. But Edward had a massive secret. Through his investment firm, Reyes Holdings, he had used offshore accounts to quietly and totally legally acquire a massive 40% stake in the Sheffield Textile Group. 40%. That is just a staggering amount of hidden leverage. The Sheffield family thought they were the absolute monarchs of their 60% domain. They were completely unaware that the woman they were literally laughing out of the wedding hall basically owned nearly half the walls around them.
Now, Aisha actually discovered this 40% ownership the very night her fiancé humiliated her. But she made a highly calculated decision. She told absolutely no one. You might be wondering, why stay silent when you hold the ultimate trump card? Well, she wanted to see who these people really were when they believed no one was watching. She essentially gave the Sheffields a character test. She gave them the opportunity to treat her with basic human decency, without the threat of financial ruin hanging over their heads. And as we just saw at the engagement party, they failed that test spectacularly. So, now she had her answer, and it was time to execute. Which brings us to Section 2, the boardroom shock, the very next morning. The next morning, absolute chaos breaks out at Damien's office. An emergency board meeting gets called because the CFO is in full panic mode. He informs Damien's father that this mysterious entity called Reyes Holdings has requested to freeze their shares and is suddenly asking some incredibly dangerous questions about the company's offshore accounts. Damien's father is completely stunned. He asks, "Who is Reyes Holdings?" And right on cue, the boardroom door opens. The Aisha who was dismissed and humiliated the night before, completely gone. The Aisha who walks into the boardroom is wearing a sharp, tailored business suit, carrying a heavy file. She introduces herself with a calm smile, saying, "I'm Aisha Reyes, CEO of Reyes Holdings, your 40% shareholder." Damien literally shoots out of his chair in absolute shock. Realizing his entire empire is suddenly on the line, Damien's father completely changes his tune. His voice cracks, and he actually tries to say, "Aisha, sweetheart, let's talk about this." Sweetheart? I mean, the hypocrisy is just stunning. But Aisha drops this absolute mic drop response. She says, "My father purchased this company 3 years ago, back when your family dismissed him as a small-time vendor and cheated him out of a fair deal." She totally shuts down that whole sweetheart act. She reminds him that just 12 hours ago she wasn't good enough to be his daughter-in-law. But now he's trying to sweet-talk the woman who controls the future of his company. It is a masterful display of holding on to your leverage until the absolute perfect moment.
Moving on to Section 3, Uncovering the Truth, a Reckoning.
By the following week, the financial news networks are all running the exact same headline on a loop. Reyes Holdings demands full financial audit of Sheffield Textile Group. Aisha's legal and financial teams methodically dig into the books, and they uncover some staggering ethical rot. We're talking falsified invoices, tax evasion, and extensive records of severely underpaid factory workers. Turns out, the Sheffield family had built their massive wealth by operating legally in the gray areas, without a single shred of mercy for the people actually doing the heavy labor. So Aisha isn't just taking over a company here. She is exposing a deeply corrupt corporate culture. As the walls are completely closing in, Damien makes a desperate move. He waits outside Aisha's office and practically pleads for a second chance. He's apologizing, asking to just start over. She looks right at the man who didn't hesitate to publicly destroy her just a few weeks earlier, and she delivers this freezing, definitive rejection. "You didn't reject me because I had no family name. You rejected me because you thought I was weak. Now you know I was never weak. I was just quiet." And honestly, that's such a powerful takeaway for all of us. Conflating silence with weakness is a fatal flaw, both in business and in life. Aisha's quietness was actually her ultimate strategic advantage.
And that leads us to Section 4, the final takeover, total control.
The execution of this takeover was incredibly efficient. Tracing the timeline, we started engagement night, where Ashia's leverage is kept entirely secret amidst a brutal public humiliation. Literally hours later, the next morning, we get the boardroom takeover, this shock and awe reveal of her 40% stake. By the next week, the financial audit is demanded, squeezing the Sheffields and exposing all their unethical practices. And finally, just 2 months later, through the fallout of that audit and some brilliant strategic maneuvers, Reyes Holdings achieves a massive 65% controlling stake in the company. In just 60 days, Ashia went from being laughed out of a wedding hall to undisputed corporate dominance. The power shift is absolute. With that 65% supermajority secured, Aisha completely cleans house. Damien's father, removed from the board entirely. Gone. Damien himself, stripped of his position as CEO. The family that prided themselves so much on their name lost control of their very own legacy. And why? Simply because they underestimated the silent vendor they cheated years ago and the quiet daughter they humiliated.
But the story doesn't just end with vengeance. It actually ends with transformation. Aisha rebuilt the Sheffield Textile Group from the ground up. She immediately implemented fair wages for those underpaid factory workers. She instituted honest, transparent business practices. She didn't just take power, she used it to fix what was broken. And beautifully, her mother, who stood there paralyzed by fear at that engagement party, now gets to watch her daughter on the news with immense pride. Aisha established herself as a formidable businesswoman, absolutely. But more importantly, she established herself as a person who learned to ruthlessly stand up for herself and for others.
Which brings us to the end of today's explainer, and I want to leave you with a really provocative question, drawn straight from the source material. Did Damien deserve a second chance? The last time he saw Aisha, it was at a press conference for the new headquarters. He watched her from a distance, but he never actually approached her. He learned at the highest possible cost that some things can just never be undone. But what do you think? Was Aisha's total corporate takeover completely justified, or should grace have played a role? It's definitely a fascinating question about power, consequences, and human nature. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and remember, never underestimate the quiet ones in the room.